So that's my studio.
Very nice studio.
Thank you.
That's super nice. So what formed the decision to choose the, let's say, with the mic pre's? Like, did you listen to them? Did you have a chance to listen to them and pick them based on how you liked how they were sounding?
I kind of, by recording a lot of different stuff, has an idea on how the mic preamps.
Are we ready?
I kind of have an idea on what coloration I have on the different mic preamps, right? So I know that this one is a little bit hard. This is more soft and rounded. Another one is more straightforward, you know. So when I'm kind of thinking, oh, what type of music am I recording today? What kind of snare sound should I have? You know. But I'll say this with snare, that I almost always record it through the X73, and that's just because it's a classic. It's just a classic setup, you know. So most of my thing with the snare, for instance, is going in and changing the snare, tuning it differently and stuff like that. I used to have a mixer console. Those two boxes with 8 channels used to be my mixer.
What brand is that?
That's an Electro Sound. It's from the 70s. It was built in '76.
So it took out the EQ.
Yeah, I took out all the modules because I didn't want to spend more money on fixing it, and people, you know, everything is in the box today.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if you're sitting in a big studio in New York and you have like a budget on 1 million kroner on recording an album, then it's fine. You know, you can use a console because you have the time, you have the money to spend for days in and out, you know. But the problem is with a console, if you work in this kind of business lower down, you know, in the food chain, you know, where there's not that much money on the budget, then it's important for the customers that they can call you 1 week after and say, okay, can you do this and this adjustment to the mix, you know, and then you are able to do that. Also, with the modern sound is a more compressed and more. It's just the production has developed, you know. Like if you watch a movie from the 70s and you watch a movie from today, you know that, I mean, you cannot record a movie today or make a movie the same way you did before. You have to have the ability to adjust a lot of things and make changes along, you know. And if we're sitting in the studio and we're recording, we jump from one song to other like that, you know. Then we jump to that song and we jump to that song. Back in the 70s, they were kind of working on one song at a time, you know, roughly. And of course they could go back and forth, you know, but it still required then you have the same setting on everything, you know. You can't just open up another song. The channels have to sit on the same tracks and all that, you know that. So for me, you know, I like to work in the box. I think there's nothing else.
But like for someone who used to work on the analog console, yeah, now you're working in the box. Do you feel like you're missing something, or you've missed something sonically?
No. Not with the sound of Pro Tools today. I mean, with Cubase it's different, and with the cheaper interfaces it is different. But for a Pro Tools system, if you have the cards and everything and the right hardware, it's a very analog sound actually. I have a friend who recorded in the States. I actually went there for one day. He did 3 albums with that band, and they were recording in some of the big studios in Los Angeles. And they went into one studio called Sound City. And the first album they recorded was recorded in my original first studio. And the band took it to Los Angeles, and the record company loved it so much that they chose us to release the recordings. So they actually they got the backup tapes, and then they mixed it again on a big console. They like to mix on a big analog console also back then. And then they did another album where and then a third album. And the third album I actually went to Los Angeles to edit the drums for them, because they had a guy editing the drums on the second album, and they didn't feel he did very well. And he was actually an editor for Michael Jackson, but he still didn't work Pro Tools the way I work it, because I've been working in it a long time, and I love to edit drums. But the thing is that on their second album, when they went into the studio, they have Studer tape recorders. They have Studer A800, I think it's called, the big ones.
Yeah.
And they actually set it up with a Pro Tools rig, and they were doing a recording, and they were running it to both the Pro Tools rig and the A800, and it was a Pro Tools HD Plus, HD3, right? And they did a blind test. You know, like they played two different, and they say, okay, which one do you like? And they couldn't notice the difference. They said it sounds the same, and that was on tape and on. So I think that Pro Tools has gotten so far today, you know, that it doesn't really matter. And it depends on which philosophy you have when you're recording, regarding to the mixing, because I don't really mix that much on my stuff. I record it the way it's supposed to be recorded. I don't do a lot of tweaking and do some bus compression.
Like you try to get a sound right from the recording.
Exactly.
So, for someone who is using, let's say, the analog hardware itself, like the LA3As that we can see them looking all lovely, and having the emulations of the plugins, how far have the software developers gone with their emulations? Are they close, or
very far? No, it's very far. It's very close today.
The emulations are spot on. Would you say?
Yeah, mostly. I mean, they are, and I mean, of course, I would say if I set the plugin up, you know, what's the point is actually, I think, with the plugin developed is that if I set up my LA4A, and there's actually an emulation of that LA4A, I can hear that my LA4A sounds more like an LA4A than the plugin. It seems like the plugin works like an ideal LA4A, right? And that's not what I want. I want to be able to hear that the compressor is working, you know. And in that sense, they sometimes make them too nice, and I understand that, because then they can be used for more different things, you know. So it's a choice from the they don't make it exactly, and that I think is on purpose. But it sounds like, and it works like it. But and they're very close.
Yes. Looking at, I mean, from the tour of your studio, checking the acoustic, you know, the wood panels and stuff. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well.
You did them yourself?
Yeah, I designed it myself. I have a carpenter working with me, of course. I mean, what I can say about it, I mean, is because I built 3 studios now, so I kind of got an idea of what to do, and it's simple, very simple. Like you don't want no symmetry going on in the studio. You don't want equal spaces going on all the time. You need, so that's why when I'm using this wood you see on the walls, it's raw planks. They're just a tree cut into planks like that, but not shaped on the sides, you know. So they are kind of uneven sizes all the way down. So when you put them up, put another one up, another one, the space in between the wood is different everywhere. It's not the same anywhere, and by that you get asymmetric constructions, and that is good for diffusing the sound and spreading it out in a nice way. And then I use soft and hard material. So I have one hard wall here, I have a soft wall here. I try to tilt every wall. So I have a straight wall here, I have a tilted wall here. And I try to avoid corners build up bass. Of course, this is built in a room, so I couldn't really avoid it. But if you see the new studio that we will be building with, it's gonna be like that, you know. It's not gonna be any corners. It's all gonna be tilted, you know, no parallel walls and stuff like that. So you need hard and soft material. It's something about an idea you have on how you want the room to sound, and you try to put that into thought, you know, and using different material. I wanted a room there that I could strip of almost all dampening material, so I could get a big drum sound going ba 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 ba, you know, like that. Or I can put in dampening material and say, you know, like really tight sound. So I can tune the room and according to what kind of sound I want on the different tracks I'm recording.
So like before you mix, what do you do? Do you like reference? Do you have reference? Do you listen to other songs to?
Sometimes I do. I think you know that I'm 50 years old, right? So I've kind of been listening to a lot of music since I was young. So it's all in my head, you know. When people come in and say they want to sound like that, I know how that should sound, you know. Just like with I played with you those basic tracks, you know. That's if you hear the original songs that they released, it sounds pretty much the same as that, you know. And so I tend not to. I don't like to copy.
Right.
And I have the idea that if it sounds right, it is right, you know. So I like to love what comes out of the speakers, no matter how, you know. And if the musicians want it, you know, we can hear something, and you know, I like to. If I don't know, if I'm not totally sure what they, how they want to sound, I don't know the band. Then I say to them, you have something in reference, what you like, and I listen to that days before, so I have an idea of what is it they like.
Alright.
So are you that type like you start with the drum like when mixing, or start with the vocals, or what do you do?
First of all, I think that I mean, it took a long time for me to really feel comfortable about mixing, and I still have a long way to go. I think I mean, mixing is on the mixing part. When I mix, I think that you have like 3 processes, and the first one would be cleaning up and editing. It would be the timing and the tuning of the vocals and
tuning of the vocals,
like naming the, you know, it depends on if it's your own production. Some of these things are already done, you're doing on the way, but if you get the production from somebody else, you sit and listen to each track. You listen to everything, and then you kind of listen to each track and find out you need some tuning on the vocals, and you need a little bit of cleaning up noises you don't want in the track, and naming the tracks, arranging them, you know, so it looks good for you, so you can you have a nice overview, and then it's just setting up your mix, like with your bosses and with your reverbs and all that, you know. It's kind of a rough mix you're making there. You're setting it up. So now you have everything, and then you start mixing, and that's 3 different processes in that, because sometimes people in the mix, they do a lot of other stuff, and it takes off their mind from mixing, and becomes a disturbance having to edit or something like that. But it's a problem with many musicians that, you know, you think you're going to mix, and then they want to add a vocal or something like that, and your whole mix is tilting, you know, and they don't understand. Now you have to begin again somehow. It can be difficult just to add some vocals and maintaining the whole balance that you have. But I like to put in those 3 different processes. Regarding to mixing, it's practicing and doing it, learning by doing and stuff. I don't really think, when I'm mixing, I don't really think so much about listening to where the levels are. I just kind of set them. It just and mix, and you put more and more treble on. The ear will just adjust. So the ear is very deceiving. So you have to go out and listen to the natural sound and talk to people and relax your ear, and then you come back and listen with total flatness again. So 15 minutes, 2-3 minutes break, back in again, mixing. It's all about making decisions. Yeah.
So since you have, let's say, quite a fair experience with various preamps, now that we have most project studios where budgets are sort of small, what would be like an advice or a recommendation for those who can't go, those who just need to record maybe a track at a time, and they need a good preamp, something that can give them decent results with, let's say, vocal recording? What would be your choice of preamp? Like a preamp, not actually a one preamp that cuts and fits all, but something that can give you very decent results for vocal recording.
If I had all, it's hard to say. Then you have to go for a sound. You have to go for, say, okay, this is the sound I want, and then you will just compensate. I would say this, that my learning is that a really great mic, a difference between a cheap mic and a very expensive mic is not that much on a bad preamp. You know, it's like a how can I say that? A really good microphone can sound shit in a bad preamp, but if you have a really good preamp, then a cheap microphone can sound really good. So I learned once back when I was when I had a really good microphone, and then I didn't have a very good preamp, but then I bought this Slam preamp, and I just noticed that when I took a 57, I could use it for vocal and tweak it a little bit, and after I'm sitting listening, I can't really hear that, wow, this is just a 57 going on here. So my advice to anyone having a product is go out and buy one really expensive, use your money, spend your money on the preamp, on a really good preamp. It's really worth it, and it has to cost around 6,000-7,000. That is like 350 Ghana cedis at least, and it must not have any
3,500
and no
you say 350 Ghana cedis or 3,000.
3,500 Ghana cedis.
So that's roughly about $1,000.
And it must not have any preamp. It must not have any equalizer or compressor in it. Just the preamp. It has a phase boom. It has a 48 volt, you know.
Okay.
And a low cut can have stuff like that. But as little functions as possible. So what you're buying for the money is preamp. And I would recommend not buying a tube preamp unless you like to buy new tubes. But most tubes, they last 6 to 10 years, you know, depending on the quality.
Okay. I think it depends on the brand. The brand will put in very good tubes.
Yeah. I mean, the one I had, the Solo 610, is actually a nice example of that would be the one microphone I would have if microphone preamp I would have if I could only have one. And that is a very good advice. I think you will notice anything you do just sounds great suddenly. I cannot stress it enough how important a good preamp is. I actually don't care that much about the microphone then. That's the next thing. You need to buy a good microphone. But the point is this, with microphones is difficult because I have the one microphone I have that I use not the most but the least is my most expensive microphone, and that is the C800G, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't sound that great on many things. It doesn't give me what I want. There are some voices there's a Danish artist called Christopher who made an international hit, a world hit actually, and the latest album he rented my microphone to record his album because they wanted that kind of sound and they were looking for exactly that microphone for his voice. But the thing is that if I would have anything, if I said I cannot live with one microphone, I would live with two microphones. And one would be my Sound Deluxe 195, which is a condenser microphone and which is simulating a U67 Neumann. But that microphone has a few settings and it's really it can be used for a lot of things. I think it's the vocal mic I use the most, and it is the condenser mic I use the most. There's also the 414, but it's a little hard on the vocal. I wouldn't like to record vocal.
Which one? The AKG 414? Or?
Yeah, 414. Yeah, exactly. It's a little hard, I think. I don't like it on vocals. I use it a lot on choir, actually, backing vocals, because I have this nice fat sound on the lead vocal, and in order to make the backing vocals sit better in the mix, I would use the 414.